Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. A week from now, Landis will be at Big Ten Media Days. Excited?
I am excited. Yeah, it'll be we're going to do some Kings of Columbus there, or some Kings of the North, some the podcast stuff. A lot going on at Big Ten Media Days, and you and I will be there for the whole thing, so that'll be fun.
We will. So it's 3 days next week: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Our plan is to have Kings of the North shows probably out Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, Friday morning. Our plan is to probably do live sort of react to the day shows in the evening on the Kings of the North channel on Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. I think we'll take some viewer questions for some of those, and then we will have a Kings of Columbus. I would imagine Ohio State is talking next Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine we'll react to that in some way and have that up on Wednesday afternoon on this Kings of Columbus channel on the podcast. I think will be our plan, right?
Yeah, that'll be our plan, and then we'll have a couple podcast dailies from there too, and we'll have at least one probably snap judgments off of what Ohio State says on Tuesday, and then maybe one other if we can squeeze one in, depending on the timing of things. But yeah, like we'll have, I don't know, we'll end up having like 15 shows or something like that between this channel and the Kings of the North channel.
Bang for the buck. Bang for the buck. Got to go into Indy. But on this show, we are talking about playoff paths because I thought it was worth sort of resetting the shape of the schedules and the season before we go talk to people. And so this is not a prediction show. We've done those to varying degrees, and we'll continue to do those about where we think Ohio State will land in the playoff pecking order, what other Big Ten teams we think will make the playoff. This is more like the logistics of getting there. And so we want to talk about the possibilities of if Ohio State is this or this or this at the end of the regular season, where they would fit into a 12-team playoff bracket and sort of their paths to be various things. And then we want to talk about the paths of some other Big Ten teams: Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, Iowa, anybody else that might have an outside shot of like what really matters for them getting there. And there is a little bit of a tiebreaker conversation here that I think will be worth having because it hasn't been decided yet. And so I double checked with the Big Ten. They have not finalized the tiebreaker procedures for an 18-team league with no divisions. They had that previously, and there are some obvious things that will be in play. For instance, head-to-head now and forever will always be the first tiebreaker. If you're in a 2-team tie and you played each other, the winner gets the edge. So we know that. But what about a 3-team tie? What about if you didn't play each other during the regular season? And in an 18-team league, that certainly is possible. But I think the most interesting thing is like, what if Oregon, Michigan, and Ohio State, who all play each other, go 1-1 against each other, and 2 of the 3 of them can make the Big Ten title game? That's the most part of this, is it not, Landis?
No, yeah, it is. Yeah, and there's some stuff we'll talk about it later in the show. I guess there's like a potential structure I think you can reasonably assume could be similar with what the ACC decided last year when it eliminated divisions. Like they were kind of the first league to go down that road. Even like the SEC, I don't think has established its tiebreaker rules yet. I don't know why. It doesn't feel like it should be all that complicated. But yeah, that 3-team tie at the top of the league, which certainly is on the table, would invite a whole lot of scrutiny, I think, is the best way to determine who gets to go to Indianapolis.
Okay, so let's talk about the possible worlds for Ohio State. And there's one world we're not going to talk about, which is Ohio State missing the playoff. Because it's hard to envision that world, or it's hard to envision any shows existing in that world because the fan base will have set everything on fire, right? So we're not like what about the world? If they're 8-4, will they make the playoff? Like, we're not doing that. We're not doing, what if they're 9-3 and they're in the race for the 11th spot against like 6 other 9-3 teams? Like I've said in the past that I think like a 9-3 Ohio State team is a decently positioned playoff team in a lot of ways, depending what the rest of the world looks like. But that's not what this show is about. Unless you want to throw that in. You want to throw in 9-3 Ohio State? Are you good?
I'm good. I'm good on 9-3. Yeah, let's not do that. Yeah.
Okay. Because the thing about 9-3 would be, right? We're not doing it. Anyway, here's the thing about 9-3. So I do think it would require like a really major non-conference game. So if Ohio State was playing Texas this year in the non-conference and then also playing Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State, and you're playing 4 bangers and you go 1-3 in the bangers and you look really good in all your other games, like that's the world. 9-3 where your non-conference is bad. And I'm not sure necessarily, I guess Iowa's the 4th best team on the schedule, but I'm not sure they're at banger level. Like that's the thing where that's a different conversation. I don't know if they have enough high. Okay, we're not doing 9-3. Ohio, undefeated Ohio State. Let's talk about Ohio State as the Big Ten champion.
Yeah.
The playoff path as the Big Ten champ. I think the main thing here is getting into the Big Ten championship game first. So I think we'll have a little bit of the tiebreaker discussion here. And the second thing is the SEC champ versus the Big Ten champ, the 1 seed versus the 2 seed. How might that shake out and how important is that? Let's talk about getting in first. If Ohio State runs the table, they're obviously going to make the Big Ten championship game, and then they would be favored to win the Big Ten championship game. If the 1-1 against each other scenario, if Ohio State loses to Oregon and beats Michigan and Michigan beats Oregon, right? Like that, which I think is the most likely scenario of that 3-way thing, because that's everybody winning at home. Because Oregon goes to Michigan, Michigan wins that game. Michigan goes to Ohio State wins that game. Ohio State goes to Oregon wins that game. If we get to that scenario, I think Ohio State would be in very good position to be one of the 2 teams that would make it out of the tiebreaker, even though the tiebreaker hasn't been established. So we can talk about what we think the tiebreaker should be. And we can use some of the ACC thing. And you and I both researched this, I think. So head-to-head, the thing is, like the first, in a scenario where 3 teams go 1-1 against each other, and they don't lose to anybody else, like you throw out the first 5 tiebreakers because nothing matters. Because it's like, well, what about this? Well, what about common opponents? What, like, it's sort of like, well, you've beaten everybody except head to head, right? So that's, you automatically get to like at least number 4 on the tiebreaker chart very quickly, don't you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess you do, because even like the common opponent thing is like, it's not uniform. Like not all 3 teams have the same common opponents, right? So I actually don't know what you do in that scenario. I guess you would just ignore it, right?
But the thing is, like, nobody's lost otherwise. So it's like, well, everybody's perfect. Like, it almost doesn't matter. The only common opponent among Michigan, Oregon, and Ohio State is Michigan State. That's the only team that plays all 3 of them. So, but the whole point is like, well, if somebody lost to Michigan State, you're not in the tie. You're
not tied.
So,
right.
So here's going by the ACC standard last year, and we can talk about whether this should be the tiebreaker that the Big Ten would adopt. The thing that would be the most relevant tiebreaker that would apply is basically strength of conference schedule. I think is the first thing that they would get to where you would break something. So you would look at the conference records for everybody that you played. And in that scenario, Ohio State, if you look at the betting lines for who's going to win the Big Ten, Ohio State plays 5 of the 6 top. They're one of them. They play 4 of the other 5 top 6. The only one they don't play is USC. I think Ohio State has the toughest schedule in the Big Ten. Now, this is Big Ten only because Michigan's playing Texas and Fresno State, and that's probably a tougher overall schedule. But in the Big Ten, Ohio State has the tougher schedule among these toughest among these 3 schools. I think Ohio State would be very well positioned if that was the tiebreaker. Do you think conference record among the opponents should be very high on the tiebreaker list as the Big Ten thinks about this?
Yeah, I think certainly higher than what else you could get into, which is like passing the buck off to some advanced analytic company to decide who is the better team based off of, I guess, a bunch of different metrics. Like I would rather it be settled by something that like something tangible that actually happened on the field, right? And I guess like it is interesting that Ohio State ends up being the only team that plays 4 other teams, right, in that mix. Like, I think Michigan only plays 2. No, Michigan plays 3. Penn State plays 2. Oregon plays 2. Iowa only plays 1, which is like very interesting. So like you would feel shortchanged, I guess. Like if you're Iowa, it's like, well, we didn't make the schedule. Like, why are we getting screwed over because the Big Ten decided this is who we should play this year? But I don't know any other avenue you could go down that actually takes like on-field results into account. So I think that should be pretty high up. Yeah.
Do you think that's where they will land? Do you think they'll wind up adopting pretty much what the ACC has, which again has this tiebreaker very high on the list of what really matters?
Yeah, I would think so. That's why it's surprising to me that neither the Big Ten nor the SEC has like released their tiebreakers yet, because it's like it's staring you right in the face. Like what would be different? What is your preference compared to what the ACC kind of laid out already? So I do think that'll be fairly high. Yeah.
So as you said, the ACC last year said they would have Sports Source Analytics create a team rating score, which is if for some reason the conference opponents have the exact same winning percentage, which would be almost impossible to have happen, right? And then if somehow this analytics rating score is the same, they said then it's down to the commissioner to pick it at random, which is like coin flip territory.
Yeah.
And so I think random coin flip territory absolutely boggles my mind. I can't believe how afraid people are of hurting other people's feelings. Nobody wants to make a decision. I also understand the idea, though, that maybe you don't want to outsource the decision. I wouldn't want to outsource the decision. I would want to insource the decision. So I would be in favor of having some sort of Big Ten collection. And I guess if you hire the analytics company, maybe you are insourcing it. But I think you should be in charge of your own decision here. However, in 1973, the Big Ten ADs, after Michigan and Ohio State tied, voted to send Ohio State to the Rose Bowl instead of Michigan, and people still talk about it. Like people are still mad about it. Bo Schembechler in the moment called it the darkest day of his athletic career to that point. So I guess that's why people don't want to make decisions, because somebody is going to be mad and they are never going to forget it. So I think you should be bold and not be afraid of making your own decisions for your own conference. But at least I think there's some things in the past that would make you understand why they might run away from that.
Yeah, well, just make the people mad at Sports Source Analytics and not at the Big Ten itself. Like, they're going to be mad at the Big Ten either, but they're going to be mad at the Big Ten either way. They're going to be mad at the Big Ten for like making the decision that makes them angry, or for passing the buck to somebody else to make the decision, and they'll just call them cowards for not making a decision. So like either way you lose, so you might as well be in control of it yourself, I think.
But I don't know if in 1973, a computer, like one of those computers that took up a whole room, spit out a thing that said like Ohio State will go to the Rose Bowl. I don't know if Bo Schembechler, well, no, he probably would have been. Frickin' computers. I'm sure, but I think it doesn't have quite the legs of the ADs voting to not send you, right? Although maybe Bo Schembechler would have never owned a computer then, right? Like it would have been.
Yeah.
Nobody in Michigan, people in Michigan would be still like writing on
it'd be
yellow
a
legal
computerless
pads.
state. Yeah.
A computerless society of Michigan fans, and I understand why you're mad, because there's no way you're tied. Like there's so many things that are equal, but a decision has to be made. It's almost, it's one of these things of like, this is what you wrought. And I did it on another show of like why I'm not 100% sure that everybody can handle the divisionless world, because the divisions really help with things like this. It's like, go win your division.
Yeah.
And it's much harder to have a 3-way tie within a division than it is to have within an 18-team conference. And everybody in the division is playing each other, and you have your destiny in your own hands to a greater degree. And there's just a lesser chance of this. So they decided this is what they wanted. And now they're going to have to, I don't love it when people root for chaos in sports, when it's like, hey, I really love this sport. I love watching the players compete on the field, but I also hope it's a mess. I love a mess. It's not my favorite thing, but there's they did this to themselves. I would almost be curious to see like how people would react if we wind up with a 3-way tie at the top in one of the conferences this year.
Yeah, I don't think they love it. I don't think they love that. I don't think like when it happens, they're gonna love the chance of teams playing each other like 3 times in 4 games, which is on the
Yeah.
table as well. Like it is. And there are people who have voiced concerns about that stuff already. I'm not saying like everyone is naive to it, but I think if you were someone who is just like championing like playoff expansion without thinking about like what exactly that could look like this might smack you in the face in a way. It's like, oh yeah, I guess we should have thought about that. So would you be, do you want divisions back? Are you like, is it okay with how it is? Or?
I kind of do want divisions back, because the thing that I talked about is the idea that in a divisional world, if your 2 best teams are in the same division, they played each other.
Right.
So the idea of like, oh, the Big Ten championship game wasn't very good. It's like the Ohio State-Michigan game was the de facto Big Ten championship game. It's like, yeah, they played each other and they figured it out and the winner got to go. And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the winner of the Ohio State-Michigan game has been the Big Ten. Like how many times was the Big Ten champ in 7 years? Like 7 out of 10 years. Like that was like a huge thing. Whoever wins it. So it's like you did have a championship game. It's not like you never had them. It's not like they didn't play. They just didn't play when Dr. Pepper sponsored it or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you didn't get the TV eyeballs but you got the TV eyeballs on the regular season game, which is like it's the highest rated regular season game every year in college football. So I think sometimes you think, well, if we have divisions, we're missing something because the two best teams won't play. It's like, yes, they will. They just won't play in the championship game.
Yeah.
But they played in the thing that was really the championship game. So what are we actually complaining about? And all we've created now is a chance for a rematch. So now they'll play twice. Okay, like that's definitely better. How about just win your side and then play the guys who win the other side? Because like all the other sports, as much as people fight about this, like every other the NFL isn't 32 teams. It's like, okay, let's see what happens. Oh. Like you put things in little boxes and say, win your box.
Yeah.
And then we'll see at the end. And guess what? Some second place teams get to go too. So it's not, I could see us going back to divisions in 5 years because I think it's possible this isn't going to be as great as people think.
Yeah, I could see it too. Oh, I guess it would depend on further expansion too, right? If it becomes a 20-team league and then you have 10 teams in each division, like I would be fine with the Big Ten almost playing like 11 conference games and 1 non-conference game. So you play everyone in your division, 1 crossover and 1 non-conference game. But I don't know that they would want to do that. But like as it's currently situated, like I think they could still get away with divisions. And it's actually funny to me that I think part of the aversion to divisions, at least in the Big Ten, is like you just never thought the West might be competitive enough to actually hold up to the East when the championship game rolled around. It's like, well, now you're putting Oregon and USC in the West. Like maybe it will be, right? Like you're better situated to try it now than you were previously. So I will not be shocked either if we get back to divisions, so long as the league doesn't become like too bloated for that to be actually feasible.
So let's talk about Ohio State being the Big Ten champ, getting in the championship game, which they would be very well positioned to do. Obviously, if they're undefeated, they're in. I think if they lose one, they're in very, very good position to be in. I will be shocked if a 1-loss Ohio State team somehow loses out on the tiebreakers. And because especially like if Ohio State beats Oregon and Michigan and then loses a weird game and is tied with Oregon and Michigan, then they win that head-to-head because they're 2-0 against Oregon and Michigan, right? So like there's just, it really, if Ohio State, so I think the thing that people just have to keep in mind, which I think most of our viewers and listeners know, is that they don't have to go undefeated to get to be the Big Ten champ and be a 1 or 2 seed. They don't.
Yeah.
1 loss and to get there. I don't want to say that 1 loss in the regular season doesn't matter. But is it possible 1 loss in the regular season doesn't matter, honestly?
Yeah, because even like the thing we used to talk about, it's like you can afford to lose unless you lose the game you can't lose, right? Like I don't like that doesn't even really apply here anymore, right? I guess it could, but it's less likely to apply here, I think. So yeah, it almost doesn't matter, which is why again, like some college football, I don't even know what you want to call them, purists, are upset about the way the dynamics of the regular season have changed now because one loss used to matter greatly, although actually not really. At least not 14 playoff world. But yeah, it matters less so now, even like dramatically so.
So just keep that in mind, and then Ohio State will get to Indy. And man, if Ohio State gets to Indy, it's going to be a rematch, right? I don't think USC is getting to the Big Ten title game. So if Ohio State gets to Indy, it's going to be against Oregon, Michigan, Penn State, or Iowa. Because Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State are the three other top teams, and Iowa is a very good team with a very easy schedule. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to Iowa in a little bit, but they are the most likely team to sort of backdoor this of like, hey, we didn't have to play Oregon or Michigan, and we lost to Ohio State, but we beat everybody else, and now we slid in as the number 2 seed in here. But it's going to certainly be a rematch, and is there any part of that that make that more difficult for Ohio State? Right? Is that that's going to be a little weird. We're thinking about their path as a Big Ten champ. They're going to have to beat a team a second time. Is that a thing?
Maybe, like, it's not like they did it in 2019. They had to play Wisconsin twice in 2019, so like it's not like it's unheard of. I honestly think the only one that I think is different would be having to play Michigan a second time. Like the emotions of having to like reload and play Michigan a second straight week would be very strange for both teams. Like to kind of figure that out and how to channel that the right way. Otherwise, like, no, I don't think so. Like they'll have been Ohio State. The latest of those other three games is Penn State the first week of November. So there'll be just about a month that had passed before that rematch happens. So no, I don't think it increases the difficulty like in some kind of significant way other than the Michigan game, because it would be back-to-back weeks and obviously everything that comes with that.
We don't have time to go deep on this because this would take another half an hour, but I still think the regular season Ohio State-Michigan game carries more cachet, carries more emotion. Mm-hmm. And to me, an Ohio State, for an Ohio State fan, I would think you'd rather beat Michigan in the regular season at home, end that losing streak. Like if you said you have to split, which one do you want to win? I'd say win the regular season game, but for playoff seeding, you'd rather win the Big Ten championship game, right? So but the idea of, oh my God, Ohio State is number one. Ohio State is cruising along and then loses to Michigan at home, but still is making the Big Ten title game against Michigan. And now let's go beat Michigan and get that revenge. I don't know. I guess it would be sweet revenge, but that would be a crazy week. I still think the regular season game matters more, but then you'd be the 5 or 6 seed instead of the 1 seed or the 2 seed.
Oh, I would like, what is it? People like, obviously people care about like the all-time record and like winning streaks and all that stuff. Like how is the Big Ten championship just like thrown into the all-time record as like a regular game?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Although we probably can ask Michigan and Ohio State historians about that, but I'm sure. Yeah, to me, it's not like it doesn't count. I think you still count it. And again, I guess in the NFL, I don't exactly know what they do when they say, the Ravens have beaten the Browns, whatever, many straight times. Like, would playoff games count in that? I assume they would, but I don't know for sure. But this is college football, and there's some things that'll be different. So yes, they count. Every time Ohio State and Michigan meets on the field, those count.
No, they count. Yeah, it definitely counts. I don't know. Yeah,
count your heart. Count your heart the same way. In your heart, inside your soul.
Yeah, I think so. This game, yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I don't know. Play it on the moon in January, like it counts in your heart.
So then, if Ohio State's the Big Ten champ and undefeated, do you think they're the 1 seed, or do you think the SEC champ's going to be the 1 seed?
That's a good question. I guess it depends on who the SEC champ is. Like, I don't think by default the SEC champ is the 1 seed. Like Georgia's schedule is pretty tough, actually. So like if Georgia has the same record as Ohio State, I think Georgia's probably the 1 seed.
I think
probably also
Texas.
Yeah. Texas. So like if for some reason it wasn't either of those 2 teams, then I think Ohio State is the 1. But like if the records are equal and it's those 3, and it's Ohio State compared to Georgia, or Ohio State compared to Texas, I think probably the SEC champ is the 1 seed.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we can try to battle against Southern bias or whatever it is, but equal records, I think the SEC champ is going to be seated ahead of the Big Ten champ. Now, if the Big Ten champ's undefeated and the SEC champ isn't, then I think the Big Ten champ will be the one. I don't know that 1 versus 2 is a huge deal. I do think there's a spot where it might be a huge deal. So let's talk about Ohio State getting to the Big Ten championship game and not winning. Do you think that the team that loses the Big Ten championship game will definitely still be seated above the 3rd place or 4th place Big Ten teams? Or do you think there's any way where you could fall if you lose? I guess I would say, I think, and I ran through this on the show where I said I was worried about divisions. For the most part, the committee in the past has not dropped conference title game losers a ton. They really haven't, unless they felt like that team didn't deserve to be there to begin with. And that's not going to be the case anymore with no divisions. So I'm pretty sure the 2nd highest seeded teams from each of these conferences will be the teams that lose in the conference title games.
Yeah, I think that's right. I guess like if it's like a rematch in the conference title game and like you end up losing both, maybe like if there's like a perception of like, okay, like this is say it's Oregon for whatever, like if Ohio State loses to Oregon twice and like everyone's like, that is by far the best team they played, and like maybe the rest of the schedule wasn't quite as good as you thought it was, so it's like the 2 biggest tests they've had, they lost both. Maybe, but I still think no. But perhaps if it's a second loss to that team, there's a pathway there. But I would say that the conference title game loser is the 2nd highest seeded team coming out of the conference. Yeah.
Okay. So then this, I think, is the world where this is where the upsets, I think, are going to lie in the 12-team playoff. So I was thinking about this. I do think you have to throw Notre Dame in here, but I think the candidates to be the 5 seed and the 6 seed as the non-champs, because again, everybody knows the top 4 seeds are going to be the highest rated conference champs. So unless something crazy happens, that'll be the champions of the 4 Power 4 conferences. I assume the 5 seed and the 6 seed will be the SEC title game loser and the Big Ten title game loser, and maybe Notre Dame would work in there because Notre Dame can't get a bye. And I was just looking at somebody's projection that had Notre Dame as a 6 seed. The 12 seed is going to be the Group of 5 champ. Like they get an automatic bid, and they're going to be the 12 seed unless something unusual happens, like Cincinnati the year it won the American would have been higher than the 12 seed. But the thing that has happened is all the teams that would have been the candidates to be really good Group of 5 conference champs are now in the Power 4, whether that's Cincinnati or Houston or UCF. Like, it's just the idea of it is like it's SMU. Like it's who would it be now? I don't even know, like, who's going to really. So it's almost certainly that. So here's the upset. I think then being the 5 seed is going to be way better than being the 6 seed, because being the 5 seed means you're going to get that Group of 5 team as the 12 in the first round, and you're going to be at home. The 6 seed, which just lost a conference title game, is going to get a Power 4 team as the 11 seed that had the week off and did not play in a conference title game. And how big of a deal do you think it could be for these teams to have a week off while somebody else is going to bang their head against a great opponent in a conference title game? It's a bye for a worse team going into the playoff.
Yeah, no, I think it's a huge deal. It feels like the 5 seed, right, in the NCAA tournament almost a little bit, where like you have to go like, congratulations, you're in the 5 seed. Your reward is you get to go play a conference champion, like a really good like mid-major conference champion. It's not apples to apples, I understand that, but it's like your reward for having a quote unquote better season is like playing like an also really good team that has like earned a week off. I would not want to be in that spot, because that's like that's like the 4th best team in like the ACC or the Big Ten or SEC or the Big Ten you end up playing, right? Like, yeah, not a spot I would want to be in. I think it is a monumental deal to avoid being that 6 seed or yeah. I guess if you're below the 6, that means you probably didn't play in your conference championship game. So like 6 is probably the seed I'd least like to be.
Yeah, I guess it could be that if Notre Dame squeezes in as 6, now you're the 7, but it's the same kind of thing.
Same
it's
idea.
Basically,
yeah,
any conference title game loser that's not the 5 seed I think is in trouble. And so what Ohio State would be playing from the Big Ten championship game, I think is even a little less being the 1 or 2 and a little more not being the 6 or 7. Because if you wind up as the 5, yes, you've got to play an extra game, but all these are home games for the 5, 6, 7, and 8 seeds. They're they're campus home games in the first round. But if you're playing Fresno State or Boise State in the shoe or whatever in the first round, like, I don't, but if you're playing like
Missouri,
Tennessee or Missouri or Ole Miss or Penn State or Michigan, right? That want like the 4th best team in the Big Ten that just had a week off when you had to go play Oregon, right? I just think this is it almost feels like a wrinkle. Not that they didn't think of, but this feels like something like, oh, this is actually the worst part of the playoff. That you had an extra game. You earned the right to play an extra game, but it didn't get you a bye. So good luck playing a team that had a week off. It feels like fraught as heck, man. Fraught. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but but the only way to avoid that would be to like not tie a conference title to a bye, which like I actually wouldn't have a whole lot of issue with. Like I actually think like just the 4 best teams should get a bye, and maybe winning a conference championship should just merely guarantee you opening at home in the playoff and not necessarily getting a week off. So I don't. Maybe they'll change that too. I maybe they probably won't. But there are some things. Yeah, there are some things that maybe they didn't quite think out when deciding to go to a 12-team field. That like on the fly they might think to themselves like, no, we should do it this way instead because we're actually not positioning ourselves to like have the best possible championship matchup when we're making, Ohio State or Texas have to play a really, really tough first round playoff game simply because they lost their conference title game.
Which leads us to Ohio State's playoff path without making the Big Ten title game, which actually might not be that bad. I don't know that I don't think this is a death sentence. So this means that you're probably, you still could get, especially if you got a campus home game. Like we got a week off, we're still the 7 or 8 seed. We get a campus home game. And so now if you're the 7 or the 8 seed, or maybe you don't get a home game, you're the 9 seed or the 10 seed, right? It's like, okay, well, now we've got to get ready. We're going to play probably a team we should beat in round 1. And then, in the quarterfinals, we're going to go play somebody really good. If you're the 7 seed, you'll go play the 2. If you're the 8 or 9 seed, you would win and go play the 1. But you would have the week off. There's a part of me that almost, because like when Urban Meyer would talk about this or other coaches talk about this, they talk about the grind. They talk about the week after week after week of having to do this and to have that week off, because otherwise, I don't know, man. Like you're not turning around and playing the playoff game the week after the conference championship game. You're not.
Yeah.
So like, it's not like it's week after week after week, but it still is an entirely extra week of not having to prep, of being able to ease back, right? So I guess it's that you get 2 weeks off instead of 1, but I just still think it's enough of an advantage that I think these the third best teams in the SEC and the Big Ten, I will be very curious. I will be looking at them and thinking about like betting on them to win the college football national title, because I think there could be an advantage in here. So,
any disadvantage to being off that long though, you think?
I guess so. Now we're in the what would you rather do, but I just think the way people talk about it, is you take the rest. I don't know, because it's not 41 days off, right? So again, it's not back to back. It's not like everybody. So there'll be conference championship weekend. Then there's an off weekend and they hand out the Heisman and all that stuff. And then you get ready and then you play the first round of games that next week. So I don't know. Right? But yeah, I think that's right.
Oh yeah. So conference championship weekend is the 6th, 7th. The following, it's like Army Navy week is the following week. And then, the 20th. Yeah. So you're right.
Yeah. So, because then now, and then also now, but if you think it's too long to have off, well, now the top 4 seeds are going to have that that long of a time off anyway, right? Because they'll just have it at a different time because they play conference championship weekend, but they got to bye. So anyway, like I just think this might be the sweet spot of rest, not rusty, but rested for the long haul. I don't know, man. Main thing for Ohio State fans, like, don't be worried about this. Like, the Big Ten championship game will be fun, and Ohio State hasn't been there in a while, and Ohio State wants to win every regular season game, and if they don't, people will be disappointed. But there is a path for even like a 10-2 Ohio State team to win the national title. Absolutely, in my mind. No doubt about it.
Yeah, no.
Take the 9 seed and then go do your thing with a week off that the Big Ten title game participants didn't get.
Yeah, no. I mean, I in a weird way, you would almost feel better about their odds of winning the national title if they were in that position. And I don't know, like the rest thing. It's not merely rest to like, and it's hard. Like it's a recalculation as it pertains to college football, because like in college football, like you like get the rest, but there was also like you knew who you were going to play too. Like you had like 4 weeks of prep for like one particular opponent. Like that doesn't exist. You're going to have 3 weeks off, but like you're not actually going to know who you're playing until the week before the game. So that's like more like a normal prep. So like I wonder about the advantages, like how much advantage is there actually to just like working on fundamentals for 2 weeks while you're waiting. Like I don't know. There actually might be more benefit to like being locked in and playing and like practicing for a specific team that maybe we should give them a little more credence to, but the rest is probably more beneficial than anything else. So yeah, like a 10-2 Ohio State team that still gets to start the playoffs at home would feel pretty dangerous to me. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be like a top 4 team, I think, in that field, looking at like a 10-2 Ohio State sitting at the 6th seed. That would worry me. Yeah.
And if they do wind up in a 3-way tie at the top of the Big Ten, the third team that's left out, they're going to have like this whole weird motivation. They snubbed us, whether it's a scheduling win percentage or some kind of computer algorithm or AD's voting. They're going to feel snubbed, and then they're going to feel snubbed and go home and get mad while they're resting and watching everybody else play, and then be ready to go for game. Okay. So anyway, you kind of touched on this before. I like the playoff. I think we're going to have great regular season games, but we sort of did just outline how the regular season doesn't matter to Ohio State, and they're fine either way. Did you feel good about that exercise? Or do we just create a world where it's like, you know what? It'd be great for Ohio State to go 10-2. I hope they lose 2 games because it's their best chance to win it all. That's not what we said, and it's not what we think. But I don't know that 10-2 would significantly decrease their chances of winning the national championship as opposed to going 13-0. Assuming it's the same level of play, that it's like they go on the road to Oregon, they play a good game, and it's a tough, 3 time zones away. It's just a tough loss. And then, you know what I mean? Like Drew Aller has a good game and a football bounces off and Penn State gets a weird pick 6 and wins that game, even though Ohio State felt like the better team. Like, as long as they don't have huge flaws that they're showing on the way to going 10-2, I think they're good. Do we just kill the regular season?
No, well, I think the conversation about the regular season being watered down, I think rightfully applied to teams like Ohio State, right? It makes the regular season much more meaningful for a large portion of the sport for which it wasn't meaningful before, right? That was always the conversation in my mind. But yeah, the regular season dynamics, I think, do change rather drastically for Ohio State. Not that if it happens, I'm saying people should oh, whatever, we lost, it's fine. I'm not saying that should be your reaction, but the path is still very much there to win a national title, even with 2 losses, which is a kind of a weird thing to try to wrap your mind around.
Yeah. Aim for number 7. That's the sweet spot. Try to be number 7. Fingers crossed for the Buckeyes. Okay. So we wanted to lay that out. I would rather, before we get to the other teams, I would rather have the slightly tougher schedule and anticipate winning tiebreakers than be like, oh, great, we missed all the best teams and we're going to slide in the back door. If you're a team like Ohio State, we'll get to Iowa again. Like, I think Iowa's thrilled with its schedule right now. But for Ohio State, I would take Ohio State's schedule over Michigan and Oregon's schedule when it comes to who they play in the Big Ten.
Yeah, you're just positioned a little better, I think, to weather some potential, I don't know, cloudiness, I guess. Yeah, the possibility of this becoming like a very sort of like muddy exercise is pretty high. So you want to be the team that kind of has the pathway that best positions you to kind of get through it. And I think that's no doubt Ohio State. Okay.
When we come back, we will talk about playoff paths for some other Big Ten teams because other folks are getting in. How will they get there? We'll do that next on Kings of Columbus. All right, back on Kings of Columbus. We want to talk about the paths for some other teams. And does Oregon, like we think Oregon's a good team, Landis.
Yeah.
But when we think about Oregon's playoff path, they host Ohio State and they're at Michigan. We've kind of already covered that three-way thing. Do you think Oregon could make the playoff losing both those games?
Yeah, I do. Because so like a 10-2 Oregon would have like what could be a pretty nice Boise State win to open the year. What could be like actually a decent like Oregon State win in the rivalry game. I was looking at like the win totals for those teams. Like Boise's is I think 9, and they're the favorite to win the Mountain West. And Oregon State's is 7.5, like in the 2-team Pac-12. That's essentially like playing another Mountain West team. But if the conversation comes back to, which like we've heard before from the playoff committee about like records against teams that have winning records, like Oregon could be situated pretty well there, even if it ends up losing to both Ohio State and Michigan. They also play like Wisconsin, which should be a decent team, and Washington, like which could be a decent team. So I think there's probably still enough meat left on that bone that I don't think I'd be wildly concerned if I'm an Oregon fan and Oregon finishes regular season 10-2.
Yeah, it's almost hard to imagine them missing the playoff. As you said, Boise State was the overwhelming Mountain West favorite. They got 38 of 46 first place votes in that preseason poll. UNLV was 2 and Fresno State was 3. So that's like a perfect kind of. I like Oregon playing Boise State. They've had fun games before, but like that's a really good like a quality win that really shouldn't be a danger zone for Oregon in that game. And then Oregon's regular season, we've also rendered it meaningless. Okay. This is like, we're just giving so much ammunition to the people who are like, I hate the 12-team playoff. It's killing the regular season. Like Oregon, Ohio State's going to be fun. People are going to care. It's going to matter. But they both really should make it. Like if something has gone wrong, if both Oregon and Ohio State don't make the playoff.
Yes. And I think like if you want to like open the can on the 9-3 conversation, like a 9-3 Ohio State, I think stands a much better chance of making the playoff than a 9-3 Oregon would, if you want to go down that road. But yeah, any version of a 2-loss Oregon, I think is almost definitely in this playoff field.
Yeah. Okay. Michigan. What do we think about Michigan's playoff path? And again, I'm worried about in the end, like arguing against everything I've been saying about the college football playoff. But like, for instance, we just talked about how strength of schedule within the Big Ten very likely will be the definitive tiebreaker behind head-to-head. So for Michigan playing a team like Texas, like you don't get the bonus in a Big Ten tiebreaker of having played them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they beat Texas at home in week 2, it is absolutely will launch their season. But if they lose to Texas and now they're in like, hey, well, we lost 2 Big Ten games kind of conversation. Now they're a 3-loss team. And it'll be like, yes, maybe they lost to the number 1 seed. I think Texas does have a chance to be the best team in the country in the regular season. How much does the Texas game complicate Michigan's playoff path in your mind?
That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, unless they absolutely get their butt kicked, but then if that happens, then they're probably not a team that's going to win enough games to be the playoff anyway. Like, I still think it probably helps them like more than it could hurt them, right? Like I think the perception of like playing a game like that helps them, even if they lose and it's close. Like, I think that might help them. Like, so complicate, yes, I suppose is on the table, but I actually think it's mostly a bonus for Michigan to play that game out. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's why like I'm fearful of, we talked about, I can't remember if we talked about on this show or Kings of the North, like instead of a world where I thought like teams might be more willing to schedule games like this because of the expanded playoff, we could enter a world where teams are just all about like win accumulation. But like I'm hopeful that like a game like this, maybe like the rest of the country can say like, no, it is worth playing that game. So you don't necessarily get penalized for it. In fact, you might get rewarded for it if you have a couple losses, but the committee thinks to themselves like, no, they went out and challenged themselves and played a team like Texas. Like I think that will help, but I guess I could be wrong.
So there are some people that think Michigan is going to fall off a cliff. I don't think we're in that camp. I think we've also discussed that we think Michigan could be pretty darn good and go 9-3. So if you think about, because we think they might be playing 3 of the 4 best teams in the country in Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So in that world, they also play USC in September. They also play Fresno State, which there was a time when I was picking Fresno State as the Group of 5 champ. Unfortunately, Fresno State coach Jeff Tedford just had to retire this week again because of health issues. So that's going to throw a little bit of a wrench into their season. That's week 1, Fresno State at Michigan. I thought that potentially was a danger game for Michigan. As we said, Fresno State picked 3rd in the Mountain West. I think you lose your head coach. It doesn't mean they can't be a good team this year, but I think it decreases the slim chance that I thought maybe Fresno State had of going in and upsetting Michigan. But Fresno State, Texas, Arkansas State is a really good like non-conference schedule. Like there's no MAC teams in there. That's a really good non-conference. Right. But then also USC, also at Washington, Michigan State, Oregon, at Indiana. And if we think the Hoosiers and Kurt Cignetti are going to have a pulse, and then like at Ohio, do you think they say they lose to Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon? Could Michigan still make the playoff at 9-3?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I think maybe they could, depending how competitive they look there, right?
Yeah.
If they play well and beat USC, if they, Washington's not going to be great this year. We know that. But if they go on the road and like take care of business there and just like handle their business in a fairly emphatic way the other 9 weeks, and they say, listen, man, I don't know what to tell you. We lost by a combined 23 points to the teams that are now the 1, 2, and 5 seeds in the playoff. Like what? I like that's not worthy of a 10 or 11 seed. Like I think their schedule is it's just so weird. Their schedule has been so easy, and now their schedule is so hard. I think they would have as good of a case as almost any 9-3 team in the SEC or Big Ten, depending what exactly the wins and losses are. But the schedule's tough, man.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think it would require basically like not enough 10-win teams to fill the field, and I just don't know that we're going to get to that point. But it's possible that we do. I think the SEC in particular, like that kind of like second tier of the SEC, could perhaps cannibalize itself in a way that maybe we're not expecting. So if that were the case, like if Michigan is being compared to 3 or 4 other 9-win teams that are vying for a playoff spot, or even like 2 or 3 other 9-win teams that are vying for a playoff spot, I would absolutely think that their resume would hold up better than anyone else's, given the quality of team they play. And they could also be helped. Like if I'm not anticipating Washington being very good, but maybe they'll be better than I think. Like that could help them. Nor am I anticipating USC being very good, but like they're the team with the 4th best odds, I think, right, of winning or 5th best odds of winning the Big Ten. So like, I don't know, if USC is like an 8 or 9 win team, then maybe that helps Michigan's case too. So like, it's not like I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, if they lose 3 games, there's no way they're getting in. But if I had to guess, they probably still won't have like a door open for them, because I just think there'll be too many 10-win teams to like get through first. But It's not impossible, and I think they stand the best chance of anybody of doing it if a team were to do it.
I think the thing that would almost have to happen is you sort of treat them as a 10-win team because they took on Texas in the non-conference.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, well, I mean, if they would have played Eastern Michigan, they'd be 10-2. But instead they played Texas. And are we just going to be like, well, you didn't get the 10 wins, you're out when you decided to schedule Texas. So I think that will be a test for the committee because, again, we're going to get to Iowa in a second. I think there's a world where you could analyze a 9-3 Michigan team and an 11-1 Iowa team and think Michigan's better.
Sure. Yeah. As long as those hypothetical 3 losses are close, I think you would definitely believe that Michigan's better.
So this will be a test for the sport. It'll be a test for the committee. Are we in win accumulation mode, which I think we have been for 120 years? Or are we in something beyond that? And to some degree, I mean, like this made people mad last year when Florida State was undefeated and didn't get in because people that sort of was like, well, it's not just win accumulation mode. We're thinking about how good you are. With an injury and things like that, that was a little more complicated. That this is a little more straightforward on football and schedule strength and playing Texas and playing the other 2 best teams in the conference. I'll be curious how the sport handles this because I think the idea that Michigan is a very good football team and goes 9-3 is probably my prediction for them this year. Like, I think this test is going to happen. That it's not like, Michigan fell off, they went 9-3. It's like, no, Michigan's good and went 9-3. So then what? I think it could wind up being the most interesting test of the 12-team playoff and of the committee this season is how do you view the defending national champs who played 3 of the 5 best teams in the country, lost to all of them, but looked pretty darn good in their 9 wins. What do you do with it?
Yeah, no, that's why I think Michigan is the most interesting team in college football this year because of that, because of all the different dynamics that are at play, both within their program and with how their season could play out. Like
that's a show. That's a preseason show. Most interesting teams, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's do Penn State. Penn State's path. We've talked a ton about Penn State, West Virginia in the opener. Penn State's about a 12-point favorite in that one, but it's at West Virginia. We think West Virginia is going to be good. Mm-hmm. They have like 3 really interesting road trips this season, and at West Virginia, and then October 12th at USC, off week, September 26th at Wisconsin, then home against Ohio State in what is not going to be the whiteout. Penn State announced this week their themes for their games. So I think that tells us, and everybody thought it already, that Ohio State at Penn State will not be a primetime game. I think if they thought there was any chance it would be a primetime game, they would have made it the whiteout. So I think we assume that's going to be big noon. You look at the history of Ohio State, Penn State. Ohio State has been the whiteout for Penn State 5 times. Ohio State has lost 2 of those games. 1 went to double overtime and Ohio State won, and 1 was a miraculous 4th quarter comeback by Ohio State that they won by a point. So 4 of the 5 games when a Penn State gets a whiteout in prime time against Ohio State, like they give Ohio State, they're even with Ohio State. So even though we knew this was coming, now that it's kind of official, it is a tough break for Penn State that this thing isn't at night. Ohio State's a more talented team, but Beaver Stadium at 8:00, man, it's not easy.
It's not. No, it is. I talked about this with Audrey Snyder a little bit on last week's episode of Kings of Columbus. Like, it's not something that Penn State is particularly happy about, that like Fox has sort of dictated now that really whatever Penn State's biggest home game is most likely not going to be a night game anymore, whether that's Ohio State coming or Michigan. Like maybe if they can get an Oregon in Happy Valley, because Oregon's a West Coast team, they have a better chance of that being a night game. But I would be surprised moving forward if like any Ohio State, Michigan, Ohio State, Ohio, or Penn State, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Penn State, like Iowa kind of game, like is ever a night game whiteout anymore, which is to Penn State's disadvantage. Like it's an equalizer for them. Like it's interesting that like I actually think Penn State's overall record in whiteout games is actually not all that impressive.
It's 11-8.
Yeah, like you would think it'd be a little greater than that or a little better than that, but you and I, just like from covering from the Ohio State side of things, like know that it can be like an equalizer for them, particularly against a team like Ohio State. So and it didn't feel like the noon game 2 years ago there did feel different. Like I know it was like kind of weird for stretches in the way that those games typically get weird, but it was a drastically different environment not being at night, which definitely helps Ohio State and definitely upsets Penn State tremendously.
So do you think 10-2 Penn State gets in? At West Virginia would be is a tough game. At USC, at Wisconsin, Ohio State, and then I don't know. I guess Washington. I mean
Washington, yeah.
Washington probably, but if like probably 4 tough games, 3 of them on the road. If they go 2-2 in those games, and let's just assume they lose to Ohio State, because if you beat Ohio State, that's a turbo boost to your resume.
Yeah, right.
Assume they lose to Ohio State, but win 2 of the other 3 big ones and wind up 10-2. Are they definitely in that scenario?
No, I don't think so. I don't know that I'd feel great about it. That would actually be an interesting exercise, right? Like that, like a 10-2 Penn State compared to like a 9-3 Michigan we were just talking about. Like, I don't know. I don't know that I want to be Penn State.
They both lost to Ohio. Like they both played Ohio State. They both lost to Ohio State in this scenario.
Yeah.
But Michigan played Oregon and Texas. And Penn State lost to somebody lesser than Oregon and Texas to get to 10-2, whether it's West Virginia, Wisconsin, or USC, or somebody weird.
Yeah.
And then you start comparing like best wins, like they both would have played USC. Like I think Michigan, 9-3 Michigan would have a compelling case there. So I don't think I want to say that Penn State has to go 11-1 to make the playoff, but Penn State needs to look good. And I think there's some eye test component that has always factored in, but will factor in even more when you're trying to splice things between teams 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. You need to look like a playoff team. So Penn State can't have a rudimentary offense and their defense is bailing them out and they're winning a bunch of 17-11 games where they were trailing in the fourth quarter and then be like, we're 10-2, we're in for sure. I don't think that's a realistic world.
No, because I think like 10-2 Penn State with one of those losses being to Ohio State is a team that lost the game it shouldn't have lost. Like the perception is you're a team that lost. You're a team that lost a game you shouldn't have lost without a win. I think to like help mask it because unless like West Virginia, they beat West Virginia, Morgantown, and West Virginia ends up being awesome and like wins the Big 12, which I guess would be a different dynamic. But like Penn State is favored in every game this year except for the Ohio State game. So like people expect them to go 11-1. So if you don't meet expectations, you don't have a marquee win on your schedule on your resume. Which I'd like West Virginia's season to me is like pretty key in the perception of Penn State because West Virginia could be all like a great win for Penn State. It could be like a game that just like Penn State wins in the opener that has a little bit of buzz, but then by the end of the season, like maybe West Virginia's not even ranked. So like how much do you actually care about it? Like Penn State could very well get through its season without having beaten a ranked team, right? So like at 10-2, that's not a position I'd necessarily want to be in.
Or they could lose to West Virginia, have West Virginia be the second loss, go win at USC and at Wisconsin, and then when West Virginia makes the Big 12 title game, and you're like, okay, well, their losses are Ohio State and at West Virginia. Those are 2 good losses, and they won some other decent games. They're in at 10-2. I do.
Sure.
I think I think I'm going to wind up picking West Virginia to win that game, but I do think your point that West Virginia, how good they are, has a great impact on Penn State, regardless of how of whether who wins that game, I think is correct.
Yeah. So we'll see. Like I don't know. The last time I looked, like Penn State was like 12.5 point favorite in that game. So like people are expecting Penn State to win that game and do so comfortably on the road. So like the Vegas odds for Penn State are not necessarily reflective of like the committee's preconceived notions about Penn State, but like there's a lot of talk about Penn State in a 12-team playoff world, like how they're the team that stands to benefit the most from it. So like I think they need to kind of back that up a little bit with like a little bit of eye test, like and not just scrape through a season where they go 11-1, 10-2, like lose the game that everyone expects you to lose to Ohio State, but then like still hope you get in. Like I don't think it's quite that simple for Penn State.
And I do. So that I think you could look at Penn State 2 ways. You either look at Penn State, like Penn State is a 10-2 team. Is it not? Like that it's like Penn State's 10-2. They lose to Ohio State. They lose to Michigan. They're 10-2. That's who they are.
Yeah.
And that, for most of James Franklin's tenure, has made them like the 10th or 12th or 14th best team in the country. Like, you could look at Penn State and say, if they just are who they've been, the 12-team playoff is made for them. But I think there's some danger in that. And I think actually they probably need to show that they're a little bit more than that, that you need to give them a reason. Because, okay, they're good. They're good. They're good. Are they going to be like, I don't know. I think you could imagine a world where a team that they are competing with for a spot that maybe has a really good win and a really dumb loss, and Penn State just did exactly what you thought they would do, they would maybe lose out to a team like that, because there's just, I think they might need to like go to USC and drop 50 on that new USC defense, right? Like, oh, remember that game when Drew Aller threw 5 touchdowns at USC and they picked off Miller Moss 3 times? It's like, that's a thing. But to like go to USC and win 24-17 in a solid win, I think the how is really going to matter for Penn State, and that will determine whether 10-2 is good enough or not.
I think you can like look at last year, right? Like they were 10-2 last year with an offense that nobody wanted to watch because they were just they were terrible. It's like, would that team have definitely gotten to the playoff? Like, I know like they after Penn State lost to Michigan, they were 10th. They only dropped to 12th because it was like a fairly close game, I suppose. But they were like right on the edge last year. They were 12th going to play Rutgers. They beat Rutgers. They bumped up to 11th going to play Michigan State and beat Michigan State. But like, I don't know that I want to be Penn State with 2 losses under my belt and like going into the backstretch of the season, like hoping you can hang enough on Purdue, Minnesota, and Maryland for people to think you're good and you get one of the last playoff spots.
I think that's right. And I think like the idea of like, hey, remember that game when Michigan like didn't throw a pass in the second half and beat Penn State? That was weird and cool and bad for Penn State, right? I mean, it's like you can't sort of be a punchline along the way, and you've got to give the committee a reason, or you will be in danger. I think you could be bland and just hope that enough of your competition is 9-3 and not 10-2. But bland 10-2 is not a guarantee.
Right.
And bland 10-2 is what they have been more often than not, which again, anybody in the country could have a 90-minute discussion about, is a bland 10-2 Penn State team a good thing or a bad thing? Is it exceeding expectations or missing expectations? And go ask Nebraska if they'd take bland 10-2, right? So, I mean, this is a playoff discussion. I think it's a good framing for Penn State going into the year. Iowa's going to be favored, I think, in every game it plays other than coming to Ohio State, because their other road games are crazy. Their other road games besides Ohio State are at Minnesota, at Michigan State, at UCLA, and at Maryland. And then they get Nebraska at home to end the year. They get Wisconsin at home, and they get Iowa State at home in the Cyhawk rivalry. So Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Iowa State are like all on that tier of like solid program, maybe have a chance to be pretty good this year, but they also might be like a good 7-5 team or a good 8-4 team. I think you could wind up in a conversation where Ohio State and Oregon are playing in the Big Ten championship game. And then you are trying to sort out the resumes of 11-1 Iowa, 10-2 Penn State, and 9-3 Michigan, and trying to determine who is a better team and who is the most worthy playoff team. And maybe 2 of those 3 get in. And is 11-1 Iowa definitely winning that conversation when they've lost at Ohio State and their next best win is home against Wisconsin? I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe Iowa State. Like, although Iowa State seems to have like fallen down a little bit in the Big 12 title odds too. I was a little surprised to see. There's like 3 teams I think that have like, was it 100-1? I think, or not 100-1, 10-1 to win the Big 12. And
we like Iowa State. I mean, we like Iowa State. We think Iowa State's going to be pretty good. Again, I think Iowa State could win that game. So maybe Iowa State props them up. But again, Iowa State in a tough Big 12 could be pretty good and go to 7-5. So is 11-1 Iowa in for sure?
Yeah, like an 11-win team not making a 12-team playoff. Like I think 11-1 Iowa is probably in. But I think you'll hear a lot of like, this is a hollow resume. I think because I think it very well could be if they're 11-1, but I would have a hard time seeing the committee leaving out a team that won a power conference team that had 11 wins out of the playoff.
Could a Big 12 team go 11-1, make the Big 12 title game, lose it, and not get in? So now you're 11-2, but you have 11 wins. Do you think that's possible
for a Big 12 team?
Yeah, like the Big 12 title game loser that has 11 wins.
No, I think.
Or do you think Darren? Okay,
I think that seems so. Yeah,
because honestly, it's kind of like Iowa's not in the Big 10 this year, right? If you're not playing Oregon or Michigan or Penn State or USC, are you sure you're in the Big 10? Or they may as well just be in the Big 10 West still. It's like, go win the West. And they have a crossover game with Ohio State. Like it's...
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, that's the crazy thing. It's like all this talk about Ohio State and Oregon and like throw Michigan in there. It's like the Big 10 championship could very well be Ohio State, Iowa, right? Because like Michigan goes 9-3, maybe, and Oregon ends up losing to Michigan and Ohio State, and like they're a very good 10-2 team, but Iowa won 11-1 because their schedule stinks. So it's like, that is. I wouldn't pick that to happen, but like there's a decent chance that could happen.
But are we and this is the thing that I guess this is a playoff discussion, right? Who are we putting in? And I'm the guy who votes on resume, right? Like that's like, I don't want to vote on eye test. I want to vote on resume. But resume is not the same thing as win accumulation. And I think you could, at the end of the year, sit 100 college football observers down and have Michigan be 9-3 and Iowa be 11-1 and be like, who's better? And have 95 people say Michigan's better.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, so is the committee going to put 9-3 Michigan ahead of 11-1 Iowa? Do you think they would? Or do you think a 2-win gap, an 11-1 team, it's too big of a gap? There's no way they could leave that 11-1 team out.
I think it's too big of a gap. I oddly think this is going to sound pretty dumb maybe, but like if it's a conversation about who gets into the playoff, I think like the 11-1 team wins that argument. If they're both in and it's a conversation like about seeding, like I could see them seeding Michigan higher than Iowa in that situation. Okay. Like the optics of like leaving out an 11-win team, I think would keep them from doing it. But like if they're both in and you're just trying to figure out like who should get a home game and like, well, Michigan's resume is clearly better, they should get the home game. Like I can also see that path for the committee, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. So we certainly think there is a chance that Iowa goes 11-1. We think this is not a fanciful conversation. This is possible.
No.
Yes.
They won 10 games last year and their offense should be a little better this year.
So that's what we're saying. And I think if you're just kind of living your life and you haven't dug into Iowa's schedule yet, it's just really easy. It's just and it's not their fault because it's the way things shook out in the Big 10 that made it so, right? It's not about their non-conference because that Iowa State, they play a better non-conference opponent than Ohio State does, so that's
for some reason, like I don't know, like I was double checking with like Iowa's win total is still 7.5. Like I don't know what that's about.
Okay, let's bet that when the show's over. Yeah. And part of it is that the Big 10 protected 3 Iowa rivalries, so that makes it a little less likely that they get out and play. If they're going to play Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Minnesota every year, then it limits your schedule more. So that is a reality. I have come around on Iowa getting those rivalry games because I actually think rivalry games are important and I understand it. But it does, as long as Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Minnesota aren't awesome, it gives Iowa a likelihood of having an easier schedule from year to year. Now, if Luke Fickell and Matt Rule get it going, Iowa might get to the point where it's like, I can't believe we have to play Nebraska and Wisconsin every year. This stinks. Like they're both 10-win teams every year. This is terrible. So, but for now, those feel like very winnable games. Even if we think Wisconsin and Nebraska are going to be better, Iowa gets them both in Iowa City, so they feel like very winnable games where I think Iowa will be favored.
Yep.
Let's talk about any other playoff paths. I do think we have to talk about USC a little bit, just because USC's schedule is so interesting. Opening in Vegas against LSU, week 4 at Michigan, week 5 home against Wisconsin, week 7 home against Penn State. They also get Nebraska at home. They play Notre Dame at home. Yeah. Like, this is the fact that they are playing both Penn State and Michigan in the conference, and they're playing LSU and Notre Dame in the non-conference. This is, I think, a 10-2 USC team is almost guaranteed to be in. And I think it's possible that a 9-3 USC team, depending exactly what's what, is in a similar position where Michigan is, where they, I think, at least are in the conversation at 9-3.
They could be. Yeah. It's like if USC like actually has its stuff together a little more than people are anticipating, then like all that's on the table. I agree with you that like 10-2 they're in, because 10-2 means you have 2 pretty good wins, no matter whatever way you want to cut it up. Like there's any combination of Michigan, Penn State, LSU, Notre Dame. Like those are 2 pretty compelling wins that I imagine a lot of other teams in the conversation wouldn't be able to compete with. I don't know that I feel great about 9-3, but it's not the worst position. It's not the worst position to be in. Like even 9-3, like still guarantees you like 1 pretty good win. And like if Wisconsin's decent, like that's another, like if Washington's better, like there are some pathways here for USC, no doubt, if USC is actually a little more competent than I'm anticipating. I just don't know that I am. Like Miller Moss, a QB, like kind of like revamping things in a pretty drastic way on defense. Maybe they're like a year away from having their stuff together, but it's a schedule that does provide opportunity. It provides like a lot of pitfalls potentially too, which is why I think like USC's win total, I believe, is only 7. But a version of 9-3 or 10-2 is a pretty compelling resume given who they have to play.
Rutgers, you want to talk about Rutgers' playoff path? What other? I'm kidding.
Only that it doesn't exist. It doesn't like exist. I think maybe the only other team perhaps worth discussing maybe is Nebraska. Like Nebraska's schedule is also pretty easy. I still think Nebraska is going to be like undefeated when they come to Columbus and then maybe win 1 more game the rest of the year. But like, say they can navigate that back half of that schedule a little better than I'm anticipating and scrape their way to a 10-2 record. I don't know. They'll be worth looking at, even if there's not a whole lot of substance to those 10 wins. Like play Colorado, like people are going to have eyeballs on that. Road games at Purdue, at Indiana, at Ohio State, at USC, at Iowa. So like if you're like a 10-2 Nebraska that has either a win like at USC or at Iowa or perhaps both, then I think you're probably worth talking about. But I think it has to be a 10. Like at like 9-3 Nebraska is just like, oh, I can't believe Nebraska went 9-3, but they're at a playoff team. But the schedule's like not all that daunting, I don't think. Like I think that's like they're like at worst like a 7-win team. Beat UCLA, you're an 8-win team. And it's like, can you steal 2? I don't know, maybe
5 of the first 6 at home. I think what we're laying out here to some degree, I think this could happen. Where let's assume Ohio State and Oregon are going to make the playoff.
Yep.
And let's assume that the Big Ten at least gets 3 and is probably in good position to get 4 teams in the playoff. I think what could happen is we might be in a scenario where Nebraska or Iowa, like the winner of the Iowa-Nebraska game, might have a better record than Michigan, Penn State, and or USC. Mostly Michigan and Penn State. Mm-hmm. But Michigan or Penn State, that team could be a more compelling playoff candidate. And we may get into a discussion for the 4th team in the Big Ten. Is it Iowa or Nebraska, who actually has a better record than Michigan or Penn State, like the lesser of those 2, but that team might be better than Iowa or Nebraska based on the schedule thing. And what will like the Big Ten itself sort of like behind closed doors? What will Tony Petitti be saying to people? And will there create like hard feelings? This discussion about unbalanced schedules, I think, could be interesting. But I think in the end, I think that will happen. I think the Big Ten will get in 4, and I think we will be having a somewhat voracious argument before the last playoff rankings between probably a Big Ten team that's better with a worse record versus an Iowa or Nebraska team that's not as good with a better record, and who should get in. And I'm not sure which way it'll go. And I'm not sure I know which way it should go, but I think we have to get away a little bit from win accumulation, right?
Yeah, no, that'll push us there, I think. Especially like with Iowa. Like Iowa, I think maybe is like the most interesting team like in that exercise, because they just don't. We talked about like how many games do you play against teams that are like viewed as potential Big Ten favorites, and for Iowa, it's just one. It's just Ohio State. They had a very favorable draw in the league. We're talking about unbalanced schedules. So like that compared to what Michigan has to do, or if Ohio State finds itself, Ohio State wouldn't be in that position if they have two, even if they have 2 losses. So, yeah, I think we're staring that down too. I'm more confident about that with Iowa than I am with Nebraska, but either way, I think we get to that conversation.
Yeah. You think 4? If you had to guess right now, 4 playoff berths for the Big Ten, or you think 3 is possible? I think 5 is practically impossible. So I think it's a 3 or 4 conversation.
I think when we did our latest playoff projections on Kings of the North, I had 3. I'll probably stick with that for the time being. I think 3.
Another thing that I think we had this conversation at the time that I think is going to happen is Notre Dame is partially in the ACC, but I think when it comes to thinking about the playoff, they will be thought about like a Big Ten team. And I think it will a chance to take away from the Big Ten just because they're in the North. And then I don't know if that could eventually drive the Big Ten to be like, all right, like we're getting penalized for you being thought of as one of us, but we're not getting any benefit from it. You're either going to be with us or not be with us. We're not going to play you anymore. Like go be thought of as the second ACC team, but like you took Iowa's spot, you took Penn State's spot because they're like, well, we're giving 4 to the SEC for sure. Like I think I'm curious how all that shakes out because the whole sport's North versus South. People have said. All right, when we come back, we will do. Haven't done it in a while. We'll do what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking next on Kings of Columbus. Back on Kings of Columbus, we're going to do what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking. Haven't done it in a while. So Landis, I would imagine you've had plenty of time to be watching stuff. You and your baby. And your baby's not your baby. I met your baby the other day. It's a big boy. It's not just a baby anymore.
He is a big boy. He's a year and a half now. He's watching the Wiggles, which means I'm watching the Wiggles. They're fine. They're delightful. My wife and I have actually like gotten like very into like the backstory of the Wiggles and like the different iterations of it and like who was married and who's now divorced and all that kind of stuff. I think to make it a little more worthwhile, but that's not necessarily what I want to talk about. But though it is a way to make it interesting. What am I watching? House of the Dragon. I think is like. Are you in on that?
We are. We missed it early, but I think we're caught up.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's good. Like I didn't the first season was fine. Like it was definitely like for someone who very much like Game of Thrones, like, yeah, like I'm gonna watch this, like I'm into it. But I didn't think it was the best thing I've ever seen. And I thought like the second season started off like similarly. And then I guess it was not the most recent episode, but the one before that. Was I think like in all of the episodes of this and Game of Thrones that have been made, like a top 3 episode. I just thought it was, and I won't spoil it, but like I just think it seems like a show that's like kind of like found its footing a little bit. So like I'm excited for where it's going to go. I like it seems like it has it's not like as expansive of a world, I guess, for the showrunners to explore as like the main Game of Thrones series was. So I'm like curious how much longer it's actually going to go on. Without, as someone who like hasn't read the books, but like if before I was just like, it's nice to have this to watch, like now I'm like very invested, like in a way that I was invested in Game of Thrones. So like I'm happy to have a show where I feel that way about it again.
I will say when it came back, it felt to me like they just assumed you knew the names of all the dragons and who rode what dragon, and it kind of made me mad because they would just be talking about like, oh, well, what about Vagar? And I'm like, is that a person? Is that a dragon? Is that a wolf? Who owns it? Which side is that dragon on? Is it a big dragon or a little dragon? Why am I supposed to know this? And the show hasn't been on for like a year. And so I like it angers me a little bit of like, well, did you get out your dragon chart? And it's like, no, I didn't get my dragon chart out to watch your show. Can you help me a little bit? And it's also a little confusing that in this version of the show, it's like the blonde, silver-haired people against the blonde, silver-haired people. And there's a guy with an eye patch, and then another guy on the other side started wearing an eye patch. And I was like, who is on whose team? They need to have better uniforms because they're all from the same line. And it's interesting that it's infighting. But on Game of Thrones, it wasn't infighting. It was everybody was different. And it was like easier to keep track of people. And so I just need better uniforms. And I need name tags on the dragons. That's all. Because it can't be this hard to keep track of who everybody is.
The other issue with the infighting is like they're all named the same thing. It's like Aemon, Daemon, and Aegon. Like which one's which?
Right.
It's a little hard to keep track of.
I mean, if like whatever, DuckTales all started fighting each other, and it's like Huey, Dewey, and Louie, which side are you on? They all broke off. They all got married. They all like intermarried within their own family, and then they all had dragons. And is that Huey's dragon or Louie's dragon or Dewey's dragon? It's like I would need help.
And by the way, there's an old Huey. Not the Huey you're watching, but there was a Huey before the Huey that we like to talk about, and there's a Dewey before the there's just a lot.
Yeah,
the Targaryens were not super creative with their names.
No,
where's Jack? Can I get a Jack Targaryen? Yeah. Like, can we mix it up a little bit?
Chad Targaryen, first of his name, uniter of the throne. So, are you also watching The Bear, which also is like a summer show that is out?
So I've watched the first season of The Bear. I didn't watch the second season. And now like I'm seeing some reaction to the third season. It doesn't even make me want to like invest in watching the second season. So like I have wanted to go back or like start and watch the whole second season. But if the payoff is just like a third season that was like rushed and is bad, like I feel like less of an incentive to do that.
I think you could watch the second season and then just ignore the third season. It's a lesson to me for this show because they dropped the whole 12 episode season at once, I think, and I've only watched 3, but the show is up its own butt. And it's just like, oh, you had a little success. Let's have an episode that is just 17 minutes of close-ups of peas. And it's like, I get that it's a cooking show, but could we have humans talk? It's like, well, at least the other show has dragons. I don't know who they are, but at least like they're food as a character, as a main character. So I'm disappointed. It feels like it got successful and they were like, we're successful. We can do whatever we want now. And instead of trying to entertain people, let's crawl up our own butts to talk about what life in the kitchen is really like. And I don't find that entertaining. So
yeah, it's just I try not to be too heavily swayed on like what I see on like social media about a show, like in a way that like keeps me from watching it. But that's it happened with Ted Lasso, and it's happening now with The Bear for me too. It's like I just don't want to watch it.
And I'm sure everybody is like at the Emmys, it gets placed in the comedy category, like it won the best comedy Emmy.
Yeah. And
the show at the moment that I've seen so far in season 3 is close-ups of peas and people screaming the F word at each other for 15 minutes. And whenever the show ends, like my wife and I was like, that episode was hilarious. Oh my God. What did you like better? Like the zoom in on the pea or the 75 bombs in 20 seconds? Oh, what a comedic plot. Like it's so like but it's like with bands, right? That's the whole thing that happens with bands. It's like they have popular music that people like, and then they're like, we're popular now. Now we can do what we want and go up our own butts. And then the thing that people liked about you completely change. So please, if we get successful, don't let us go up our own butt. Will you promise that? If you ever feel us going up our own butts, will you pull us back from the precipice? I don't
Yeah,
want to.
I'll be that guy.
I don't want to live that way. All right, what are you eating?
I've eaten, quite a bit since the last time we did this. I'm trying to think of. Oh, that's what I want to talk about. So, I live on like over by East Market. It's like a smaller version of North Market over by like Franklin Park area, and we went over there for dinner like a week or two ago. There's a place in there that's called Urban Gourmet, which I think is like fairly new in there, and it is like burgers and wings and stuff. But I've been on the lookout for like a new place to get some wings, like some different flavors or whatever. They have like a spicy lemon pepper, or like maybe they call it hot lemon pepper wing. That was pretty good. It was one of the better wings I've had. I also like a wing that's like fried pretty hard, like pretty crispy, and they do a good job with that too. So it was good. The burger was fine too. I saw the burger was good. I think that's probably what they would say they hang their hat on. Although burgers and wings, I think is in the official name of the restaurant. But really good wings, like surprisingly good. I thought they were going to be bad. I was on alert for them to not be very good, but they were quite tasty. So I'll be going back there to get some wings for sure.
Anything incongruous about a hot lemon pepper, or it went well together?
No, it went well together. Yeah. I like. I've never had like I like a traditional buffalo wing, and I certainly like a lemon pepper dry rub wing. I don't think I've ever had the two combined, but it was pretty good. I liked it.
All right. So when I was at Big 12 Media Days in Vegas last week, I wound up going to one of my favorite chain restaurants, which is not a super chain. I actually ate two of my meals there, but it's called Earl of Sandwich. And
oh yeah,
it seems anymore. There used to be one in like downtown Ann Arbor that when I would go cover a Michigan game, I would kind of go out of the way to go to. It seems like it's mostly in tourist spots now. It's like in the Disney areas. It's in those tourist spots. When we were in Disneyland Paris last year, they actually had one there, and we ate at it. But it's like in Branson, Missouri. It's like in the tourist area in Boston. It's also in some airports. The Newark airport, I just looked. It's in the Cincinnati airport, is the only one in Ohio, for instance. So I just would advise anyone to like keep your eye out. If you're in a tourist place or you're in an airport and you see Earl of Sandwich, like go there. The bread is fantastic. And the sandwich that I always get is the holiday turkey, which is turkey, stuffing, gravy, and cranberry sauce, like in a sandwich. And it's so good. And so like my family was making fun of me, like all these places you can go in Vegas. And I went to Earl of Sandwich twice, but like a lot of Vegas is just every chain restaurant in the world is in Vegas, or it's like a super fancy casino meal that I can't afford. So I also ate at In-N-Out when I was in Vegas, but I was like, well, if I'm just going to go to like a chain thing, I also ate at Cabo Wabo, which is like Sammy Hagar's Mexican place. And I drank out of a tall guitar. So like I went to all the chain things, but like if I'm just going to go to chain things anyway, I'm going to go to the one that I like the most, which is Earl of Sandwich. So I went twice. So if you've never been to Earl of Sandwich and you see it, I would just try it. They have a wide variety of sandwiches, but as a bread man, the bread is fantastic, meaning you are a bread man. But you have consumed Earl of Sandwich or no?
I have. So we were in California in April. We went to Disneyland for the day, and there's like one like right when you walk out of the park in Disneyland. So we like grabbed that and then went back home and ate them. And I got their version of like a beef and cheddar that with the horseradish sauce on it. It was really good. I was surprised by how good it was. I was expecting it to just be sort of like an average sort of like Subway kind of sandwich, and I thought it was like a few notches above that. I did really enjoy it. It made me want to go back and sample more of the menu, but there aren't any around here.
Yeah.
But it was very good. I would also recommend it.
Yeah, I'm curious about like what their business plan is, because it's tourism. It's tourist areas and airports, and it doesn't seem to be. And they whatever. One time I went to Ann Arbor. I mean, the Ann Arbor one's been closed, I think, for like 5 or 8 years now or something. I showed up one day. I was like, oh, I'm going to Earl of Sandwich. Like, it's gone. So it made a strategic decision, but like they're not like Potbelly. They're not like down the street in the mall parking lot. And I think they could be but for some reason they've chosen not to be. But usually the line's pretty long when I show up. So anyway, if you run into an Earl sandwich, I would go.
Yeah.
What you been thinking about?
I'm just thinking. So like, it used to be a point of pride for me that like I could get in a car and just like drive for hours. Like I would drive like from here to Lincoln, Nebraska for the Ohio State game, and like in an odd way, like think that was impressive. Really, all it was stupid. But I did realize, like I drove like from San Francisco to Columbus one time, which was like a weird, like a fun, interesting, also anxiety-inducing drive. But we were driving back from the Jersey Shore after our vacation a couple weeks ago, and like I realized I'm just not cut out for it anymore. And it was a sad realization for me. I just like I don't have the energy to pull it off. Like I need to like pull over and take a nap to do the drive, or like stop. We like stopped in Pittsburgh for the night. Or a couple weeks prior to that, I was like in New York for an engagement party for my brother, and like I had to stop halfway and like fully go to sleep for the night before I came home, because I don't have it in me anymore to be the king of the road like I used to be. And it was sad, because it used to be something that I actually held in great importance. You know, me and Ari hitting the road and driving for hours on end and finding ourselves in weird spots of the country. Like I can't do it anymore, and I'm sad about it.
Yeah. It always felt like you took it as a challenge or like an opportunity. It wasn't like, Landis, can you drive 1,200 miles? You wouldn't be like, it'd be like, oh yeah, no, that's a great idea. I'll drive 1,200 miles. That sounds awesome. So end of an era, man. Sorry.
Yeah, it is. I guess I got to buy airplane tickets now.
Yeah. Wow, what a world. Most of my life, I've just thought of a car as a way to get from one place to another. I haven't spent a lot of money on cars. I don't know anything about cars. I don't really have not cared much about the comfort of cars. I just want it to be, I'll go as cheap as I can go for it to be reliable. But as I get older, it's like, this seat, like that. So maybe like, my old body needs a slightly more comfortable car. That like all of our cars are dying right now. And we're like, oh man, are we going to have to buy like 3 cars in the next year, which I'll be working a second job at that point if I need to do that. But it's sort of like, well, I don't, the old model of like is just sit on raw metal as long as it has an engine. I don't care. It's like, I don't know if I can live that way anymore, because like, as you said, the body can't handle it, brother.
Yeah.
So I was reminded, I feel like too often I've made my thing that I'm thinking that I don't like baseball anymore. And so I don't mean to keep doing that, but I just am completely 1000% detached from baseball. But I was reminded the All-Star game was played here in 2024. Was the 25 years ago that it was the 1999 All-Star game in Boston when they announced the all-century team. And Ted Williams came out in the golf cart and threw out the first pitch. And they had the Pete Rose interview, but it was like they had like every greatest living baseball player was at that event. And in 1999, I was covering the Philadelphia Phillies as a beat writer. And coincidentally, the Phillies opened the second half in Boston. So it's not like I covered the All-Star game every year, but because I was going to be in Boston anyway to cover that series, and because it was this big special thing, like I did go cover the All-Star game that year, and they had an event where it was just had all of the greatest living baseball players in a conference room, just like hanging out at a cocktail party, and you could just kind of walk around and talk to them. And I was 25, walking around, like deciding to talk, like, should I go try to ask Hank Aaron a question, or should I go ask Willie Mays a question, or should I go ask Brooks Robinson a question, or Frank Robinson, or Mike Schmidt, and it just like being reminded of that it was 25 years ago. I mean, I don't know how often that kind of thing happens, but I've never been in a single room with that much athletic talent and accomplishment before. And I did a terrible job interviewing the people and trying to figure out, because it was so overwhelming. I get overwhelmed at Big Ten media days sometimes. It's like, oh my gosh, I can talk to Rutgers players and Illinois players. So when I'm having to choose between Hank Aaron and Willie Mays, my head exploded. But, you know, obviously it's just passage of time, but like the passing of Willie Mays recently and just those kind of things. It's like, man, that was, because that was like a tremendous era. That was, I actually like covered the McGuire Sosa home race in 98. Like I covered the end of that when they got to 60 and 61. And like before the steroid stuff came out and was known for sure. And like, it felt like a time when the game itself was really popular. Those older players of that generation of the 50s and 60s weren't gone yet. Like they were still all around. It's like, yeah, Ted Williams is still here. Stan Musial's right over there. Just like a wonderful time for baseball. And so, you know, you get to do sometimes in this life that we are so lucky to live when you're covering sports. How is that a job? There are moments when it's like, how am I being allowed to like be around all of these super accomplished people? And that day of being in that room might be number one on my list of like, what is this world? Because I was 25 years old and surrounded by greatness. So I was just reminded of that. And then the only thing about the baseball all-star game is that woman said she was drunk and sang a terrible national anthem and went to rehab. So I don't know what happened otherwise.
The American League won 5-3.
Yeah,
I can tell you that much.
Yeah,
so that matters. I had an experience like that too. My 1 year at Cleveland.com, like prior to covering Ohio State, there was like this big NFL Hall of Fame thing at the IX Center in Cleveland. And like, I actually, it felt different from, I don't think it's something they do every year. Like it felt like a different, like separate thing from like the NFL enshrinement, but like every Hall of Famer was there. Like everyone who was in the Hall of Fame and alive was there. And like, I got to interview like Len Dawson, which was very cool. And like, I have like a picture of me like talking to Len Dawson. And I can't remember who else I talked to. I remember talking to Joe DeLamalore too. And there were some others in there too, but like that was one of those things. Was like, I can't believe like I was like 24, and like had only covered high school sports to that point, and I'm just like, you're gonna let me go and like I can talk to whichever NFL Hall of Famer I want to. Okay, sure, that sounds great. But it was very cool. Like I'm glad I actually had like some pictures of it too, to like remind me that like, oh yeah, I get to do that cool thing that one time, talking to a bunch of NFL legends. So
crazy. The only other thing I remember from 25 years ago at the All-Star game was right when the Smash Mouth "Hey Now You're an All-Star" had come out, and I think they timed it to the All-Star game. I don't know, but I hate that song. I hate that song, and it was ubiquitous at the All-Star game that week. So you know, Willie Mays was great. Smash Mouth, awful. Okay. Thanks to you guys for being part of it here on Kings of Columbus. We have 2 Kings of the North shows this week. We recorded one Tuesday about all the issues at Georgia. We're planning one for Thursday, sort of talking about Nick Saban being gone and what that means for Alabama and college football as a whole. It is SEC Media Days, and then next week is Big Ten Media Days. So you will not want to miss our coverage from Indianapolis. As Bill said, we're going to have a bunch of stuff on the podcast YouTube stream and all the podcast platforms. And then we're going to be doing a bunch of stuff on Kings of the North. So if you're not subscribed to Kings of the North, get subscribed now, because there's just a lot of stuff happening. So thanks as always to our producer, Mike Urostowski, for making us look good and sound good. If you have gotten this far and you're like, Doug's been a little glitchy, like we're aware of it, I got to figure out why. It's my fault. And so I'm going to either throw my computer out the window or pull the internet cable out of the wall, but we'll get it figured out. So thanks for hanging in. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of Columbus.